One of the one of the issues that that all of you mentioned is homelessness. I think another study to keep in mind is the task force did a study in 2007 that looked at the best data out there on homelessness and amongst youth in America, and found, I believe the number was, the most conservative estimate is 25% of kids sleeping on the street any given night are LGBT, and as high as 40%. So that's a striking number to me, I think. I wonder how, as organizers and trying to deal with these issues, when you have, you know, a population that has things like 25% of folks are homeless, how do you organize around that? How do you deal with that as organizers when it's such a difficult task?
Well, I would have to say, well, based in New York City, I mean, you know, there's many organizations that offer programs and, you know, shelters for youth and young adults. But, you know, nowadays, you know, youth seem to like go to where they see familiar faces. You know, they see, you know, the other youth who's doing better with themselves, you know, or like the 16-year-old who's, you know, walking the same streets, but see they're doing good. So they tend to go to them, and, you know, they find that segue to where they, you know, are comfortable. So, you know, there's programs in New York City. There is like stuff like the house ballroom scene, you know, which I'm a part of. And
tell us about that. For folks who don't know, just give us a description of what the house
ballroom scene. It's just it's events that happen, and a numerous amount of events, and we sort of like compete against each other for cash prizes, trophies, whether it's, you know, voguing, walking runway, or fashion categories. But, you know, the population in ballroom has a high number of homeless youth and young adults, and within this our community, you know, they have different sort of like groups, and we call them houses. And, you know, the houses have house mothers and fathers. And, you know, the youth and young adults, you know, seem to lean towards these, you know, these different groups and houses, you know, to find what they don't have at home. So they find that the mothers and fathers, they express it to them, they give them a place to stay, you know, and sometimes it's not the best experience yet, but, you know, like I said, youth and young adults seem to go and lean towards these people who, you know, who will offer, you know, housing and shelter, and also these programs who will offer, you know, these different type of, you know, different programs for them. So.
And I think what Deshaun is pointing at is a really excellent example. You're speaking about the ballroom scene and how actually people, LGBTQ people within the ballroom scene are actually organizing to get the things that they need. So if they're, for instance, if they're homeless, they're creating families, you know, they have mothers, they have fathers, they have systems to support them. And actually at Fierce, what we believe is that when we're facing these huge challenges, and as you said before, you know, there's high rates of homelessness, and actually we've heard figures closer to 40% being LGBTQ homeless people. But like, what is really needed is not just, you know, providing services. We need organizations that are really going to take youth, help youth develop their own leadership, make sure that they have access to political education, make sure that they have all the tools that they need, all the organizing tools that they need to say, we're the people affected by these issues, and we're going to organize to make the solutions for these issues. I think that's a very important point to take away from today.
On the question of the house ball scene, I think that it's a really good point. It's such a great example of it seems to me, of a youth-led set of organizations that of young people getting together and getting what they need. It also seems to me to be one of the least tapped resources in our community in terms of organizing beyond youth, as a community as a whole. I wonder what you guys think about that. Every time I'm at a ball, and and there's thousands of people from all over the country that have come together on the strength of a flyer. And I think, wow, what if we could use this as a front end of our movement broadly? I wonder what you guys think about that. Do you think it's
Well, I have to say there are organizations out there who are really like they get funding completely for House and Ballroom to do studies and come out to the events. Like there's one big ball that happens a year. It's called the Latex Ball, and Fierce has been there too. And you know, like I said, they set up tables and it's different organizations. Like once again, Bronx Pride Center. You have Gay Men's Health Crisis, GMHC, you have Fierce, you have GMAD, Harlem United, you have all these programs that gear specifically towards House and Ballroom, and they offer so much. And as I say, the youth and young adults, that's right now, I think they're more attentive now and so much, you know, responsive as they are today than they were back, you know, years behind. But like these organizations has really like offered so much to House and Ballroom and for youth and young adults, for homeless, whether offering GED and housing life possibilities, you know, programs is just really perfect.
The Texas folks, we're having a New York-centric conversation over here. What about here in Dallas? Some of the issues that we're talking about in terms of both homelessness amongst youth, violence amongst youth, particularly gender-based violence. Are you guys seeing the same stuff? How's it play out for you?
Well, personally, I do not see a lot of that here in Dallas. From what I heard Texas actually is not that bad economically, as in like New York or Los Angeles. And we do provide housing services for homeless youth, but it's not really that much used with Youth First Texas because we don't have that much of a problem. But I think if we see that more here in Dallas, or if we get more connections from those homeless youth, then I think we can probably expand our services, but as of right now, it's not as big here.
Well, I think what's interesting about our organization is the fact that when we have these youth that are homeless that are coming into our organization, we not only link them to Promise House, which offers housing, but we also offer counseling. We also offer the GED program, and as far as like trans equality and having representation from the trans community and the people of color, we recently elected youth members who are both people of color and trans. So we are doing a lot to become more inclusive and making sure that the needs of all these youth and different communities are being met. So, yeah.
I want us to talk a little bit also about, I mean, Gabe, you mentioned earlier the need to have a broad politics, and as people of color, how that is particularly important. And so I'm wondering, in particular, we think about immigration. We've talked a lot about that at the conference. And so, you know, Texas is the kind of place where as a nation we think, oh, immigration's a big issue. How does it come up how does immigration come up in your work, Jesus or Cynthia, and how should we be thinking about it as LGBT activists as an important issue?
Well, I think as far as speaking personally for myself, my family migrated to the United States when I was 1, so I didn't really have a decision to come here to the United States. And so I was not only, growing up, I was not only marginalized for being a person that identifies as pansexual, I was also being marginalized for being a person of color and being an immigrant. I know that as far as experiences with my family, we had to deal with, I had to deal with our family becoming really dysfunctional and falling apart because both my parents were working minimum wage at factories in very difficult conditions, and I didn't really get the opportunity to sit down and speak to them. So that allowed me to just continue to allow both my students and faculty at my school to bully me. And so that just caused me to become suicidal, depressed, and I think that when we think about the LGBTQIA community, we sometimes dismiss the fact that in between the community we also have people who are immigrants, and so we need to, I guess, become more inclusive and start offering resources for those youth. I know that in our organization, I had mentorship from one of our directors there, and she helped me find scholarships, and she helped me become just more active in my community. So I think that I really needed that mentorship because I just felt alone, and I felt like there wasn't any other youth who I could relate to as far as not only being a LGBTQIA youth, but also an immigrant.